Welcome back to another episode of the Pace Podcast. My name is Alex. I'm one of the co-hosts for the podcast. We have a special guest with us again, the one and only Chase Hogue. Shout out to Chase.
Did you forget my name?
Almost. Shout out to Chase. Can you give me an introduction about yourself? What do you do in life? What do you like doing for fun?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Chase. I'm the community life director here at the Boulevard. I've been in ministry on and off for about a decade. I spent most of my time actually in youth ministry. Shout out.
Shout out
Yeah,
youth.
shout out youth. But have spent, about a decade in ministry. Spent a number of years working in the climbing industry. Actually moved to Michigan to help open a climbing gym here, and still participate in the work there. Love rock climbing. I've been married for 15 years to my lovely wife Caroline. We've got 4 beautiful children: Solon, Eowyn, Junia, and Heron. Range ages 10 all the way down to 2. So I spend a lot of my time hanging out with them.
Staying up at night.
Yeah, heck yeah. Making me sick.
He's recovering, guys.
Recovering from illness. But yeah, so I spend a lot of time with them. Love hanging out with my family. We do a lot of just like playing games together. Going on hikes together. We love being out in nature. Personally, I love to, like I said, love to rock climb. I love to run.
Shout out Shift.
Shift climbing. I am an avid like music collector. I collect vinyl records, and so I spend a lot of time doing that. I host vinyl nights at Shift Climbing. I've got one coming up as well at Upside Down Coffee that I'm going to do. So
wait, when?
I didn't tell you about that.
No, when?
In July.
Oh,
so,
July. Okay.
Shout out Upside Down.
Shout out Upside Down. New episode title. Shout out.
So yeah, I mean, I just love to do things that bring people together for the most part, except for running. I like to do that alone. That's my alone time.
Yeah, you do love running. 10 miles plus running most of the time.
Yeah. So that's me. But originally from Kansas, Rock Chalk Jayhawk, KU, Kansas University.
I love that.
Big college basketball fan. So not as big into the NBA. Which that's the big thing going on right now.
Go Knicks. I think the Knicks win it. Have you been watching it?
No.
Oh my gosh.
College basketball.
That's been good, bro.
So
you gotta wait till March.
That's right. March Madness. Most wonderful time of the year.
I don't watch college basketball, but once we get into March Madness, college ball is for me.
Oh yeah, dude. Heck yeah.
So last week, Soph and Danae, if you guys watched the episode, they talked about how do we reconnect with God in the middle of our busy lives and find that abundant life with Jesus that he invites us as daughters and sons into. And today I want to talk about something deeper, because a lot of us, we have a lot of struggle with anxiety, a lot of struggle with striving, and exhaustion comes up. But the question is, do we trust God? But more specifically, do we trust God's character? Do we trust God's character in the seasons of the lives that we are going through? So the first questions I want to ask you is, what's a season in your life where you didn't trust God or didn't see God in that moment and you were like, what is happening?
I mean, there are a lot of moments like that, I think, throughout my life. But kind of the one that stands out the most is, this was 2018. We had just moved back to our hometown, Lawrence, Kansas. Caroline was pregnant with our second kid, with Eowyn, Winnie. And it's kind of really like exciting season of our life. We just bought like a brand new house. I was working at the church that Caroline had grown up in, and where I had like kind of come to faith, or at least come to the like ownership of my faith in. And things were like looking real good, right? And so really exciting time of life. But in the midst of that, found out like that my dad had stage 4 esophageal cancer, right? So not good, not good. We found this out about 2 weeks before Winnie was born. And so it was a really interesting season because we were in the midst of this like celebration of like new life,
Yeah.
but also the grieving of this news about my dad, because they gave him about like a year or two to live with this diagnosis. And
Wow.
so, obviously entered into like a pretty intense season of just like prayer and just hoping to see my dad like make a full recovery. But I remember just praying before every appointment he had, praying that like something would happen, that the tumors would shrink, that they would just disappear, that like we would just see something miraculous, that God would just like show up in a big way in the life of my father. But it felt like every single time he went to the doctor, every time they went in to check on things, things only got worse.
Mm.
And so we found out about his diagnosis in July of 2018, and in January of 2019, so 6 months later, he passed away right after I think his 54th birthday. And so, yeah, it was a pretty like challenging season, just being a young father, being in a season when I was really excited to like kind of share this new identity as a
Yeah.
father with my father,
Yeah.
to then like lose that,
Mm.
and to also lose the experience of like seeing my dad become a grandfather, grieving the fact that like my sisters and my younger brother, like none of them were married, like grieving the fact that he wasn't going to be there to like walk my sisters down the aisle. Like, I had to walk my sisters down the aisle.
Wow.
Um, and so I came to this point in that season, and a number of different things happened in the midst of that season, kind of in the year following my dad's death, because he died in January. And then over the next year, I kind of started to develop some anxiety, depression. Winnie like had a pretty bad accident in her first year of life, and that was really scary. And she ended up okay, but it was pretty like traumatic experience for me as her dad. Um, and so in the midst of all of that, like I began to wonder like where God was at in the
Mm.
midst of all of this. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm praying, like I'm asking God for healing for my dad. Well, that never comes,
Yeah.
and he dies. I'm asking God for relief from my anxiety and my depression, and like I keep spiraling.
Mm.
I keep finding myself deeper and deeper in this like dark hole of anxiety and depression, as I worry about like the health of my kids,
Yeah.
and as I worry about like my own personal health, because that's where so much of my anxiety was born out of, was this fear that like what happened to my dad was going to happen to me, and I was gonna
Mm.
leave my kids like
Mm.
without like a father. And so yeah, I definitely felt like lost and alone
Yeah.
in the midst of all of that. And
Were you working at the church at the time?
yeah, so I was it was in youth ministry,
So you were in
which,
youth ministry and all this is going on in
yeah,
youth ministry?
yeah.
That's
I
crazy.
remember actually like 2 weeks after my dad died, I had to lead a middle school retreat. So I had to go be like the hype man
2 weeks
at this
after your
retreat, two
father's.
weeks after my father died.
Wow.
And Caroline, my wife, like her younger brother was one of my volunteers actually. And I remember he was being a punk. He's a young at that point in
Yeah.
time, and I had to pull him aside. And I'm just like there doing my thing. Like I've got to show up. I got to be present for these kids. So I'm having fun. But on the inside, I just feel empty and
Yeah.
just like dead.
Yeah.
And I remember like pulling Drew aside at one point in time because he was being a punk, and like kind of pulling the mask off and
Mm.
just like being like, "Hey man, like I'm like dead on the inside right now,
Mm.
and I need you to like get it together, or else like I'm gonna make you like send you home.
Send home
and
threat.
and like
He
and
locked
shout
in.
out Drew, like he locked in, and he's an incredible human.
He said,
And
I'm not going by
I've
Chase at all this weekend.
yeah, yeah, and I've done a lot of ministry with him, and he's awesome. But excuse me. But so in the midst of that, I remember there was a passage of scripture that really became kind of my theme verse, I guess, during this season, because there was this part of me that like I did want to like just walk away. Like
Yeah.
there was part of me that was just like, God, like what are you doing for me?
Yeah.
Like you're not here, you're not present. I don't feel you. Like I've been like on my knees, like just asking you like for help, and you're just not there.
Yeah.
And I think it's in John 8, and maybe I'm misquoting this, or not misquoting it, but citing this. But it's a passage where Jesus is he's teaching to the crowds, and basically I can't remember the context. I'm having a hard time right now, but basically Jesus tells the people, it's like, hey, unless you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, you can have no part of me, right? Unless you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, you can have no part of me. And the people are like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Like, that's weird.
Mhm.
And so the people start leaving, like crowds start walking away, you know? And so then Jesus turns to the disciples, turns to the 12. And he's like, well, what about you guys? Y'all want to leave too? And Peter steps up and he's like,
Peter.
where else? Yeah. He's like, where else are we going to go?
Yeah.
Like, where else are we going to go?
Peter the Doubter.
We have come to know that you like have the words of life, that you are the Messiah.
Yeah.
And that for me became like my theme verse, because like as much as it hurt, as much as like I felt lost and felt like God wasn't with me in like my suffering.
Yeah.
I was like, where else am I going to go?
Yeah.
Like, I looked at all the other like options out there, I guess, and everything else seemed dark. For this moment in my life, there was still like, I always say like, I wasn't holding on to anything at that point, but something was holding on to me.
That's good.
Something like God was holding me in the midst of it. And as much as I like wanted to just be like, yo, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't, like, cause he was holding me, and I knew like there's nowhere else to go. Like you have the words of life.
Yeah.
You are life and light and love. And deep down, like there was that thing that was holding me and connecting me to that truth and that reality, even though like every other part of my being wanted to just like be done. And so that's the story.
Yeah.
And like I say all that, and there's more to it, more to what I've learned, because that was, man, 8 years ago now. And that the process of learning and growing, like I'm still in it, I'm still learning. Like my anxiety and my depression didn't go away for 5 years, 6 years. I battled with it, and so I did therapy. I did medication, I did a lot of things to try and help mitigate that. But the journey was long, and it's still something I'm working through. But
I think of God's character. Like if you think of God's characteristics, you and I could say God's characteristics are different. Like you would say, hey, God, your characteristic is you're a healer. And in that season, God, I'm asking, I'm seeking you. The Bible's telling me to ask, seek, and knock, and I'm doing all these things. And my Father, every time I just go, it's just bad and bad news. And your mindset could be, man, God, are you really there?
Yeah.
And that John 8, that verse, that scripture that you referenced, that was the thing that you were holding on to. And I just think about how, like you said, that God, you knew God was holding on to you. And it's just, it's easy for me to be like, hey, I'm going to take a step away. But I think it's crazy how, like you said, like God was with you and his character didn't change. You knew that you couldn't go to rely on something else, but God was going to be there. That was good. Dang, I never knew that story. That like blows my mind. It's crazy. Like I've known you for a couple months now, and just to hear that story, it's like, wow. Because that's probably a testament to someone else. Like someone else could be going through that. And in that season, like you're a youth director, you could easily walk away from ministry because it's your dad, It's the person that gave life to you and spoken to you and grew up with you. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and, I did end up walking away
Yeah.
from ministry for a little, at least,
Yeah.
at least in the vocational, like
Yeah.
paid sense, like I did, like, a few years into it, I decided that like the best thing for me and for my family was to take a step back from
Yeah.
ministry. But what was beautiful in that season was I discovered that like, and I think this is where we're gonna get going in
Yeah.
this podcast is like I started to see God's presence like everywhere,
Mhm.
and so I started working in the climbing industry, and I started to realize that like ministry is not just something that people get paid to do; it's what we're called to as Christians, and I was then like I joke sometimes that like I did more ministry like working in the climbing gym than I ever did in the church.
Elaborate
Which
off that.
not true, but like, there was just this. You want me to elaborate? You
Yeah.
said, yeah. So, like, walking into the climbing gym, um, I just got to see a lot of different people.
Yeah.
A lot of people, different people from different walks of lives, and climbing is a really interesting sport. Like, it's very individual because
Yeah.
like you're just like climbing a wall.
I tried it once. It is very individual. I tried it
Right.
once.
And yet, like I one of the reasons I love climbing is because it creates like community better than like a lot of other sports out there. Like it builds community in this really unique way because it's like, yes, we're all individually trying to like tackle this like this project, this
Yeah.
climb. But it unifies us, like the struggle, like
Yeah.
the suffering that we're all experiencing as we're like climbing.
And they're cheering you on while
Yeah.
you're struggling.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's like, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But like for some reason, like this culture has kind of developed in the climbing world where yeah, you do. You encourage and
Yeah.
you build people up and thus like it builds community in this really unique way. And so like people would come in and it's to a climbing gym and it's different than like a weights gym where you go and you pop your headphones in and you're just there and you're doing your workout and then you leave.
That's good.
Like people,
You're right.
like you get those people for
Yep.
sure who want to just come in and climb and that's cool.
Yeah.
But like so often, like a lot of people would show up for the community to participate. And so that created like some really great opportunities for me to just connect with folks. And, word got out like pretty quickly that, Chase used to be like a pastor. So then people start like
Pastor Chase
coming to me and like start sharing their problems with me, and they start talking to me about stuff and they open up to me in like ways that like, that are just like unique. And so like I got to know a lot of people's stories. And again, it's just like a different world than like kind of existing in the church bubble,
Yeah.
And working in ministry, it can be hard sometimes because it's hard to get outside
Yeah.
the church bubble and connect,
Yeah.
which, something like we're talking about this summer with like the whole Godspeed
Yeah.
study is like how do we slow down and stop being so like task oriented and like focused on like the to-do list so that we can then see what's going on around us and connect,
Yeah.
Connect with people, connect with ourselves, connect with God. Right. And so I think like that season for me helped me to learn how to do that better.
Yeah.
And learn how to do that kind of in the quote unquote like real world, I guess. So
I wanted to bounce off that because I think there's sometimes in our life where we create different versions of God based off our disappointment. So instead of saying, this is what the word of God says, we start to say, this is who God is because of my disappointment that I've experienced in my life. So people have encountered in the climbing industry. What have you seen how people have shaped the view of God based off the season of their life that they were in? Because you said ministry, sometimes ministry is more at a shift climbing because the different walks of life that comes through, not just the Christian bubble, but and people have come up to you and said, hey, Chase, can I talk to you about this?
Yeah. So like what has their season of life and their experience is how has it shaped their view
of God?
Interesting. Yeah.
That's a good question, right?
Good question. Yeah. Yeah,
or have you noticed that?
Yeah, it's not necessarily something I've noticed a ton.
Okay.
It's because it's interesting because like a lot of the people I will encounter, they're spiritual but not religious. You heard
What do
that
you?
before? Like
Yeah.
they're like
Yeah.
they
Explain
have
that.
this like
Break it down.
idea of, I'm going to use a big word and then I'll explain it. They have this idea of the numbness. So like something bigger, something beyond themselves.
Hmm.
But they don't have a framework, right? Religion is like the framework that
Yeah.
we put the numbness in, that we put like God in,
Okay.
and it helps us as humans to engage and to participate with like with God. Um, but like a lot of people in this day and age are like really revolting against like the framework, you know. They want to kind of touch the raw and the real of like the numinous. And so like you get like all of the kind of new age type stuff where people um you know, they're just experimenting in some regard with like faith, but it's not necessarily like Christianity or like um there's just not the labels on it
Okay.
that we typically have, or they're experimenting with things that are kind of outside the norm for like the West, you know. So they're like engaging with like Buddhism or you know, maybe they're intrigued by like Islam or something like that. So I've encountered some of that in the climbing world, where you've got people who grew up in the West, maybe even grew up within the context of Christianity, but they're kind of just like experimenting, you know, because their experience of God didn't fit the frameworks that they were given when they were young. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Um, they were given certain frameworks when they were young, and their frameworks broke, or their experiences broke their frameworks. Um, and so they started to explore outside of those frameworks. Um, and so like I'm trying to think of like a good example of like an experience that someone shared with me. Um, you know, like one story, you know, that somebody shared was just like, hey, I grew up in the church and I was told like for all my years in church that like gay people are bad, you know,
Mm,
right? And then they go to school and they make a friend and find out like, oh, they're gay, and
yeah.
they're the nicest person they ever
Yeah.
met. And that breaks a framework, you know,
Mm.
something that they were given. And it's like a thread that gets pulled that starts to unravel the whole like sweater, whatever, you know, like
Like, if I grew up with this, is that really what is real?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it because there's this gal.
That was a good example. That was
Thank you.
good. That was really good.
Well, there's a gal. She wrote a book called Woven, Meredith Miller, and she talks about how often we'll build our like theological or our understanding of like God like it's a wall, like bricks being laid with mortar. Um, but she'll talk about how fragile those structures can be because you start plucking things out and it weakens the integrity of the structure,
Yeah.
right? Um, and and that's often how our faith gets built in the church. I feel like we're kind of like off topic here a
No, no,
little
you're
bit,
good. 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 I like it.
but like Meredith Miller talks about, like we need to build our faith more like a web, like a spider web, because you know, like often like when a spider web loses like a connection point, it can actually make it like stronger. You know, uh because it's not been built in this kind of like stacked, like things stacked on top of each other. It's like there's these connection points all around like the framework. And so um uh, so I think it's like that's what we're seeing in some regard in people's lives, and how they think about God is the way they were taught. Like things got like these ideas got like stacked on top of each other. So if like one block gets pulled out, the whole thing tumbles.
Mm.
Um, and so like what I think about a lot, especially like with my kids, it's like how do I build like resilient faith? And when I'm talking to people like out and the world? Like, um, what is it that ultimately caused their like framework to crumble? And I think it's something that happens for everyone. Like, I don't think this is like, it's definitely not unique to our day and age. Like, this whole like deconstruction movement, right, is like what we've kind of termed it in our modern age. Um, it's something that's happened for millennia in Christianity. People being given a certain framework and then having that framework like exposed and needing to like rebuild in some capacity. I think of like the Dark Night of the Soul, right? That was written in like the Middle Ages. That's all about this idea of deconstruction. It's the Psalms, the Psalms where David is like, God, where are you? How
Yeah.
long, oh Lord? It's like struggling with doubt and despair, and like these are human things. It's
Yeah.
not something that's just happening now. Um, we've just given it some new terminology,
Yeah.
right?
To bounce off of that,
Yeah.
the next point we're going to go into was about trust, because trust, it isn't about having all the answers. Trust is like, how do I trust God's character
Yeah.
in the moments when I don't feel the season of life that I'm in that is going well? And you mentioned Psalms and David.
Mm-hmm.
And David, there was many times I always say a Psalms keeps a doctor away. You ever heard that before?
Yeah.
Psalms keep a doctor away. And there's many times in the Bible where there's been people who didn't really trust God in the season of their life. And
Yeah.
so I want you to maybe pick a story in your life or someone else's life, because man, growing up, there was so many times where I did not trust God's character. Like,
Yeah.
people say God's a good father, but growing
Mm-hmm.
up, like, my house electricity went off because my mom couldn't pay the
Yeah.
bill to the house, and that was
Yeah.
a season of my life where it's like, I'm a young kid and I shouldn't have to be worrying about, I have no electricity now,
Yeah.
the heater doesn't work really well. So how do I trust in a God that people say I should trust in when things aren't going well? And in that moment, I'm not trusting in God because the season of my life is hell. And
Yeah. Yeah.
how do you still so the question I want to ask is, how do you still remain faithful when that character that God has isn't going well? How do you trust that character that God has is good? Because it's easy to say, go read your word. But in the season of life, like, let's be logistic. If my light is off, if my electricity is off in the house, I'm not going to go read my word. I want to go figure out, how can I pay that
Yeah.
bill to do that?
Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's a good question. So how do you trust God like in the dark seasons?
How do you trust God's character?
How do you trust God's character?
Character in that dark
Yeah.
season that you're in?
Yeah. That's good. So I mean, I'll just maybe go back to my story with my dad and the process of me like coming back to trust God, because that's maybe a great way to like just boil all of that down, is like I didn't trust God for a long time. Like,
Wow.
I felt very, very vulnerable and very like, concerned and worried about myself and my kids and my life, because like I wasn't sure if I could trust God. And the process of getting back to that point took a really long time.
What was the process?
That's what I'm trying to think through.
Yeah. That was good.
I mean, I don't know, like the process, I think it ultimately looks different for everyone. I don't know if there's like boxes to check. I don't know if there's like a well, first A, then B, then C.
It probably depends on the person.
Yeah, exactly. It depends on the
Yeah.
person. It depends on the circumstances. I think ultimately, like for me, it was about learning to figure out how to experience God in and through like every part of my life, if that makes sense. And learning to understand that like God isn't like God isn't going to simply remove like the suffering from our lives.
Yeah. We were born into a broken world.
We were born into a broken world. And like, honestly, like it was looking at the cross.
Yeah.
It was looking at what Jesus did for us, because like here is like the Son of God, like Philippians 2 says, he was God, right? Though he's in the form of God, he didn't count equality with God a thing to be grasped, right? Rather, he emptied himself and he became like us, right? So here is the most privileged and powerful like person who's ever lived, like God in the flesh. Like, and what could he have done with his life? Anything,
Yeah.
right?
And yeah.
Anything. And what does he choose? He chooses a normal life.
Yep.
He's a carpenter. He lives for 30 years. It takes a long time until he even begins his ministry.
That's good.
And then he starts his ministry, and like he could have like he could have done a lot of things, right? But what does he do? He basically makes enemies, right? Like,
Yeah.
people turn against him,
Enemies throw him on the cross.
right? And he,
Yeah.
yeah, and ultimately he's crucified. He's
Yeah.
killed. He suffers, right? He suffers throughout his life. He suffers, and so then I get to this point of just like thinking like, why do I think I should be excluded from that when God chooses the path of suffering and the path of like pain in order to redeem us.
That's so good
You know?
because the world is gonna just because you're Christian doesn't mean that
No.
there's not gonna be things that are not gonna be thrown at you.
Yeah.
And Jesus, when he came down, he knew it was gonna be easy, but he chose to do it
Yeah.
still because life was gonna throw things at him. And even when it did, he either overcame them on the cross. Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, he overcame them, but he participated in them.
Yeah.
He went through them.
Yeah, he wept. Yeah,
Yeah, and so for me, that became
That's good.
that became like a really powerful picture of like how like because it's just like God like so there's this Palestinian minister named Munther Isaac, and right now with everything going on over in the Mideast with Israel and the wars going on, and kind of like the what's happened, the atrocities that are being committed in Palestine. Munther Isaac is the Palestinian minister in Bethlehem, the town where like Jesus was born.
yeah,
And he, somebody asked him, like, as like his home was being like bombed and destroyed, someone asked him, like, where is God in all of this? And his response was, God is in the rubble. Like, God is with the people who are being like
that's good.
who are having the violence done against them, And so like when when I heard that, I remember just being so moved by it because like when I look back and reflect on like kind of my experience of losing my dad and just like my like dark night of the soul, like my experience of depression and doubt and anxiety and anger, like I was like, God, where were you in the midst of all that? And I was like, he was in it. Like
Yeah.
he was in it, like with me. Like, and it's hard to see that
Yeah.
sometimes, but it's just like, but that's what the cross is for. It's when we look to the cross, we can see that like Jesus doesn't like remove himself when we're like suffering.
Yeah.
He enters into it and he engages it
Yeah.
and he participates in it with us. And I think it's like, for me, it became about like cultivating that awareness, And so, like I said, like I learned how to cultivate that awareness in every part of my life. There's another great book called Practicing the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. It's about this monk who basically like his job is to like wash dishes. And it's about him learning how to like experience the presence of God, even in the midst of just like something as mundane as like washing dishes,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like I think my season outside of like church ministry like helped me to like learn to see God's presence in the midst of just like, you know, the average Joe who is walking through life and is suffering,
Yeah.
is experiencing something difficult. And maybe they don't even know Jesus, but there's something in them. There's that imago Dei, that image of God that like I was able to like experience in them as we talked about, just like the realities of being human, the realities of like hurting and suffering. And there was something that I then got to like expose within them and share with them in my walk with Jesus. I got to like talk to them about like what they were going through a different lens than they like were used to,
Yeah.
and help them see it in a new light. And so what's the process? I don't know. Like, I think it's just like going through it, you
Yeah.
know? It's just walking through
All the seasons you're in.
the season that you're in, and choosing to like participate on it, not existing on like the periphery of your life, but really moving into the core of it. And that could be really hard.
Yeah.
Like, it can be really, really challenging to like choose to like really endure, in the midst of suffering. We want to numb it,
Yeah.
we want to
Yeah.
like hop on our phone, and
Yep.
like, I can't tell you how
That's
many
good.
times I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna watch like 5 episodes of Community, like laugh away the pain,
Yeah.
and I think that's okay sometimes. I think sometimes we need that, like, that therapy, that kind of therapy. But like, there's a framework for understanding like the faith journey called the critical journey. And there are these different stages, I think 7 different stages of faith. But stage 4 is called the inward journey. And during the inward journey, you often experience something that they call the wall. And I remember reading about this, and basically, like, when you encounter the wall, and you encounter the wall when you experience some sort of hardship, you lose a family member, you lose a friend, you lose a job, you experience some form of like loss of identity, loss of relationship. And basically, like, we've got a couple of options when we come up against the wall, if we want to like grow and mature in our faith. Like, option 1 is like, you just kind of like avoid it, and you don't like really grow. You bounce off of the wall. For me, I think, like, I tried to figure out, how can I get around the wall? Can I go over it? Can I go under it? It's like, nah. If you've ever read that children's book, it's like, can't go over it, can't go under it. You got to go
over.
through it.
My kids can't. Also said he gotta go around it.
Go around it?
Go around.
Oh, yeah, you got to go through it. Like, that's like, I think that's like the call to the Christian, is like we aren't called to like avoid pain and suffering. We're not called to avoid like the hard of life.
Yeah.
Like, we're called into it.
Yeah. Go through it, man.
We got to go through it, because that's what Jesus did. Jesus endured the cross in order to be with us. And so, as believers, we are called into these challenging moments of life, because that's where we encounter Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, that's where we can encounter Jesus, if we like can tune ourselves to his presence properly. If we can like become aware of God's presence in the midst of that. If we're only like experiencing God when we're in these like joyous moments of life, then we're missing like a huge part of who God is. Because the ultimate revelation of who God is Jesus on the cross.
You're preaching, bro.
It is.
Preaching, yeah.
It's Jesus on the cross. That's where God reveals his character and nature, is when he is crucified. That's like N.T. Wright's whole thing, is like, that is the enthronement of God, is on the cross. He's crowned. He's like, and so if we want to know like what God is like, if we want to know where God is in the midst of suffering, if we want to know anything about God, like, we got to look at Jesus, and we got to look at the cross.
Yeah.
And so, like, for me, that really, like, I'm saying all this now, and I'm preaching this now, but it's taken me years, and I'm still learning.
Yeah.
I'm still learning. And I think that's a huge part of like all of this conversation we're having right now, is that we live in this culture that wants everything now. We want everything fast. And I wanted that, like, after my dad died, I wanted answers, and like, I didn't get them,
Yeah. No.
It took me
Yeah.
a long time and a lot of suffering and a lot of learning to be able to like come to this place, and it's only going to continue. Like, there's going to be more hardship in my life. I know that. Like, but I'm grateful to have had the experiences I've had, and I'm grateful to have encountered like the teachers and the leaders and the friends and just the people in my life who have helped me to like better see Christ.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it too, is like, we look at the cross and we look at Jesus, but then I think we look at the people around us, and we learn to see Jesus in them.
Yeah.
And as we do that, I think we become bigger, like I think that's a weird word, but we become more of who Christ has called us to
Yeah.
be as we encounter
Reflection of
Jesus
Christ.
and as we encounter Jesus and others. And I think that's really important for Christians,
Yeah.
is learn even in your non-Christian friends, right? Learn to see Jesus in them
Yeah.
because he's there,
Yeah.
he's there. You got anything else?
Oh, thank you so much for that was good. Give me some. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, dude.
If you're still watching this, what's a moment? What?
I hope they're still watching. Sorry.
No, that was good. That was funny. I like that. That's staying in there. Hey,
Yeah.
if you're still watching this, what's a season in your life? Maybe that season is good for you right now. Maybe your season's not going well.
Mm-hmm.
But what's a character of God, his love, his joy, his healing, his guidance that you can use in the season that you're in now to be a reflection of Jesus that could be helping through you, that can help guide you in that season, that can help you become more like Christ. Thank you so much for watching. We can't wait to see you on the next episode. Have a good one.